My friend Will was bent over in his front yard when I arrived. On a sunny late afternoon, Iona, Fort Myers, Florida, a quarter of a century ago. The hood of his car was up. His back and butt were facing me. His hands were on his knees, and I thought he was vomiting. Instead, he had thrown the tool he was using while attempting a vehicle repair in a fit of pure spite and was presently searching for the thing in the bahia grass. I helped him for like 20 minutes. We never found it. Oh, spite. I too suffer from this malady and have a healthy spite reaction. Just last week I murdered my favorite microphone in a fit of spite. The final blow to the LCD screen came from a bar stool leg. I used the entire stool as a pile driver. Did it help anything? Of course not. But it felt gorgeous at some moment. Maybe as the stool began its descent, I don't remember. Some kind of revenge was levied upon the microphone, which a couple of days prior had ripped me off for about 20 minutes worth of meaningful recordings. Spite. April 28th, 2006. Canadian John Walkiewicz blew up his Mississauga home on the very day he was ordered to vacate the premises because he couldn't stand the fact that he was being forced out by his, quote, hated ex-wife. Oh, spite. It was this brand of fiery spite in 1852 that gripped William Bent as he lowered a burning match to a trail of gunpowder that once ignited, lit the dark plains with a terrific explosion, a wild orange light blast. The target, his own property, known as Bent's Fort, an important waypoint along the Santa Fe Trail. Why? Spite. While buffalo roamed, the wild western days of Colorado. Detail number 1. Today's episode will be a short detail on two very important forts that have been mentioned and will be mentioned in future episodes, so I thought it informative to give these two places a little detail while the buffalo roamed. In our story of the development of Colorado, we left off with boundaries created by the Treaty of 1851, aka the Treaty of Fort Laramie. And within these boundaries would be the range of the Arapaho and Cheyenne tribal people. Borders were determined by landmarks, usually watercourses, and in this case, the North Platte to the north and the Arkansas River to the south. The mountains were the western boundary, north to south, following the Continental Divide. As stated in the previous episode, this is approximately 1/3 of the current state of Colorado. Let's start with Fort Laramie to the north, where our Treaty of 1851 occurred. About 100 miles north of Cheyenne, Wyoming, originally built by William Sublette and named Fort William, it was a trading post in the 1820s and 1830s, having multiple fur trading owners, hence different names, and with new owners came upgrades, such as replacing logs with adobe, sun-dried brick, in 1841. The name Laramie comes from a French trapper, Jacques Laramee, spelled La Ramee, like L-A-R-A-M-E-E. He and a small group settled there in 1816. They were surrounded by streams and rivers. The region was rich in desired beaver pelts. One day, checking his traps, Jacques went missing and never returned. He was supposedly killed by Arapaho braves, and his body hidden in a beaver dam somewhere along the river that today bears his name. So the surrounding mountains, the river, the fort, and the town of Laramie are all named after Jacques Laramee. In 1849, the U.S. military took control of the fort, paying $4,000 to Bruce Husband, member of the American Fur Company. As we concluded in Episode 1, thousands of immigrants were heading to California and Utah, a dangerous endeavor, and the fort was on the immigrant trail, and the Army used it as a base. It was a needed outpost in the wilderness to afford protection and a place of safety, some rest, a harbor to replenish. Also, troops were stationed there, and if trouble arose, help could start from there rather than 500 miles east in the States. The fort grew as necessity demanded. Regular mail service began in 1850. A hospital was built in 1856. The fort growing into kind of more of a town than its original wooden trading post buildings. Today, the National Park Service welcomes visitors any day of the year, from sunrise to sunset. Admission is free. There is a museum and visitor center with regular hours of operation depending upon the season and holidays. While Fort Laramie is not, and never was, within the boundaries of Colorado, it played an important part in not only Colorado's development, but westward expansion on the whole. Check it out sometime. Next up, we're going to head south, way south, to the Arkansas River, which has a general west to east tangent and acted as the southern end of the Arapaho and Cheyenne territory, as constructed in that 1851 treaty. Now, as mentioned previously, the Santa Fe Trail connected Westport, Missouri, and the states to Santa Fe, New Mexico, by way of a wide, flat, hard, beautiful road. About halfway, and it doesn't matter obviously which side you would start from, was a trading post built by the Bent brothers, William and Charles, and their business associate, Sion St. Vrain, in 1833. Bent's fort began as a fur trading post, just like Fort Laramie. In fact, also, just like Fort Laramie, it was originally named Fort William, after William Bent. What are the odds, huh? 2 Fort Williamses. The fort was perfectly situated, and permission was requested and granted by the Arapaho and Cheyenne leaders as to where to build. Charles and William Bent, both known and highly respected by the tribal people. William was in the family. 350 miles north and south separated these 2 forts, and not too far off from a straight line, dividing the plains where the native people spent so much time. Bent's fort offered the tribal trader fancy bridles, saddles, beads, blankets, lead. In return, the Bents got pelts and buffalo robes, which were sold back east at huge profits. The teamsters heading to New Mexico stopped there, as did everybody else who passed by. After watching the same movie day after day for weeks, eating the same food for weeks, talking to the same people for weeks on end, it was a treat to stop and trade stuff and information, a refuge in the wilderness. Good food, and they even had dances sometimes. The fort was made of adobe bricks, 180 feet by 130 feet. That's approximately like 2 semi-trucks with trailers wide and long. The walls were 4 feet thick and 15 feet tall. Rooms were in those walls, and they faced a center courtyard. There was a large wooden gate and a smaller pedestrian gate. Famous mountain men to infamous outlaws stopped by this fort, also explorers and military outfits. The fort was used by General Kearny in 1846 during the Mexican-American War, but hard times struck the Cheyenne and Arapaho in 1849 in the form of a cholera outbreak, killing many and freaking out the rest. Skins weren't coming in as they used to. Business was down. And a few months earlier, Charles Bent, at that moment the acting civilian governor of New Mexico, was a dead man, murdered by a large group of Mexicans and Pueblo braves during the Taos Rebellion. William Bent saw this as a good time for a much-needed change, and it just so happened that the federal government was interested in buying the fort. Bent's price was $16,000, which would feel like $700,000 today. The U.S. offered him $12,000, about $500,000 today. Huge money for something that you had already written off as a loss. But then spite showed up. And in 1852, after Bent and his men had already abandoned the fort, quote, wearying of the controversy, the colonel, while in a passion, removed all his goods except some kegs of gunpowder, and then set fire to the old landmark. When the flames reached the powder, there was an explosion which shattered and threw down portions of the walls, but did not wholly destroy them, end quote. Hall, 1889. Bent moved his operation way north to the confluence of the South Platte and St. Vrain River for just a moment, then built a new fort known as Bent's New Fort, 30 miles east of the old fort, overlooking the Arkansas, also on the Santa Fe Trail. The new fort was constructed of stone, smaller than its predecessor, with 16-foot high walls, no bastions, 2 cannons on the roof. Like the previous version, rooms, 12 of them, faced a courtyard. The new fort was not as successful as the first with regards to native trading, but certainly an anticipated stopping point for those on the Santa Fe Trail. William Bent moved on, leased the fort to the U.S. military in 1860, and died of pneumonia in May of 1869 while visiting his daughter in Kansas City. You can still visit the site of Bent's New Fort, 9 miles west of Lamar, Colorado. You'd probably have the place to yourself, too. Not many in line to see a fort that's not there. The land around the site will appear as it did 170 years ago. Still quite remote, lovely, old-time views of the Arkansas River. And while there is no fort standing, there are remains and interpretive signs, a stone plaque marker, and the feeling that you, like so many others before, finally made it to Bent's Fort. It's totally worth the price of admission, which is free. Check it out sometime. Now also, just outside of La Junta, Colorado, is the site of Bent's Old Fort, which was carefully and faithfully reconstructed in 1976, America's bicentennial and Colorado's centennial, and looks sharp and true. An honest look into the most wild of the Wild West. The grounds are currently open to visitation. The interior is closed due to safety concerns. For now. And that, my friends, concludes today's detail of the forts. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next time when we hang out with the Laramers and make Denver City real quick. So long, J.B. Reynolds, copyright 2025.